This video contains spoilers from the book, movie, and TV show.
Hey everyone, my channel is Fantasy Worlds, and here I have...
Hey everybody, my name is Brianna. My channel here on YouTube is I Have a Date Tonight, and I'm super excited to be here. The criminal justice girl
Right.
herself.
We're going to go over the amazing Interview with the Vampire, Season 1. We're going to be giving out spoilers, but we're going to be talking about theories. We're going to be giving a breakdown. We're going to be giving our opinions. We're going to be pointing out some topics that we think that are important or stood out to us. So we hope that you guys enjoy. And yeah, so let's start. I have to say, like, Interview with a Vampire, the entire season just really exceeded my expectations. Like, the whole entire season was just crazy. I didn't even have a lot of critiques, about this. And I didn't even know it was coming out. So when it came out, it was a shock to me. A lot of people were anticipating it, but I didn't even know it was coming out. So when I just seen it on AMC, I was like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. I think for me, on the first episode, what kind of stood out to me right from the beginning was the dynamic between Louie and Daniel. And like how there was, like, especially coming from Louie, but even from Daniel too, but Daniel and Louie was kind of like all over the place in his emotions, even though it wasn't necessarily shown. Like, we see him smiling at first, like when the camera was zooming into him, and then we see him kind of angry a little bit, especially when Daniel played the recording of what happened back then. So we kind of see like a kind of wide range of emotions, between them. And to me, I was like, wow, like, I wasn't expecting that. I was kind of expecting it. I didn't really know what I was expecting. Obviously, they wasn't going to be like, happy. But at the same time, it's like, Daniel, you came. You know what I'm saying? Like, he showed up. So it's like, hey, so it was like, if you have the guts to show up, there has to be a reason why. And even Louie was like, kind of like, you got on a plane in the middle of a pandemic, and then he kind of sits on that, Daniel, and he's like, yeah, because the first time, I did a bad job, like I realized that this just wasn't, I'm still interested in you and your story. This was something that I never got to achieve. And even though I have this, he has this disease, he's like, this is my last chance to get this story.
I 100% agree, and I do love that the show really opens up with, already you can see the personality and the dynamic between Daniel and Louie from their very first scene in Dubai together in the penthouse. Daniel is not afraid of Louie, knowing full well that this man is a vampire and can kill him at any moment, and that is not slowing Daniel down at all. And it's not going to stop him from critiquing and asking questions and then following up on those questions. And you brought up a really good point. The emotional range that Louie goes through in his very first scene is kind of wild. And I love that he starts off by being like, oh, back in my younger days, I was like wilder. I wasn't as put together. But I'm like, here you are, sir, in 2022 in this penthouse. And you're like, oh, welcome to my penthouse. This is my assistant, Rasheed. Daniel, you don't have to worry about anything. Let's just redo this like good old friends. But the very first time that Daniel really challenges Louie simply by playing him a recording of like Louie's past failings, Louie reacts not out of violence but emotion and like rushes Daniel with his vampire speed and is quick to say that you were disrespectful. And I do like that also Daniel owns that, and he was like, yeah, I was, and I was also high. And so I was like, oh, this show is doing something different. I'm already here for it.
Absolutely. It drags you in from the beginning. And also, I think for me, another scene that kind of stood out to me in that dynamic was like when he was like, your book makes no mention of our prior meeting. When I seen that, I watched the first episode over and over again. I was like, wow, when he said that, he definitely had an emotion there. I think that emotion was jealousy for sure, because the way he said it, he kind of looked at him up and down, and it was like, I want you to remember me, and you didn't. And and Louie is a person who loves books. And I'm pretty sure that, with him knowing that, he said that he was following in the beginning of the very first episode, he said, I've been following your career with some interest. So right then and there, we know that he's been following what Daniel's been doing. You've probably seen all of his interviews that he has done, and even people who have done interviews to him, and read all his books and his material. So you can imagine how he kind of felt. Louis probably kind of felt sad, because it's like, you didn't even mention me. He's like, how am I going to mention vampires?
Exactly.
They're going to call BS,
Absolutely. Daniel's book is about his life and his struggles with addiction and his failed marriages. And then Louis is like, yeah, but what about me? We met back in the 70s. What about me? And I was like, there's clearly more history here that we're going to discover on down the road of the season. But I was like, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of tension in the room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's there from the beginning. But I think another interesting thing is, like, in episode 1, he definitely, like, he rejects Rasheed immediately.
Yes.
He's like, he doesn't really realize it, but he does. And he's like, I work best one-on-one. Basically, I don't want you here. And it's like something about his presence, I guess, is just not, he doesn't like it. It's distracting, maybe, even. But I guess that's for a little bit later down the line.
We'll have plenty to say about the character Rasheed.
All right. So what I want to kind of get your take on is, because I feel like you give really good points on this, is like Lestat. It doesn't have to be just episode 1. It can just be what you think about him in any of the dynamics or any of the episodes. But like, I really love how you break him down. His character, or it could be a dynamic, or it could be a scene, which like it could be anything.
Oh, well, thank you again for all the very nice words. Lestat, complicated character, literally. And I love him for that. The first time I watched the season, it was very easy for me to be like, okay, I'm on Louis' side, which kind of means that I'm against Lestat. But like, on my rewatches, which I haven't stopped rewatching the show like every day since it aired, and I'm not ashamed of that. I love this show. Lestat is growing on me, and I can see where he's coming from in a lot of what he does. And it's like, I don't know, Lestat just comes to Louisiana, and he's like, well, I'm looking for the love of my life, and I just found it in a man who pointed a knife to his brother's breastbone and threatened him. And he was like, sparks are flying. I love you right now. And he's like, I'm going to do everything in my power to get to know this like amazing man that I just spotted on the street. And I love that he's smart and cunning and determined enough to get into the room with like the alderman and Tom Anderson to get into poker games. He's willing to go and talk to Miss Lily, which is Louis' best friend at the time. And even he's willing to like swallow his pride as a vampire and go to Louis' like human family dinner and like force eat gumbo that he's not interested in at all, but he's like anything for Louis. And Lestat literally means that. And I feel like he meant that in the first episode, and he means it in the last episode. I love Lestat Absolutely. A little bit.
Yes, a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm in love with all of the characters, despite their flaws.
That is
them being crazy monsters, which what vampires are. But I think for me, it's what's interesting is the dynamic between Lily and Lestat, because when I watched how she helped him pull Louis in, it's hard for me to believe that there was not a conversation prior to. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we know that Lily and Louie has this connection. You know, he loves to talk to her. They've been seeing each other. It's hard for me to believe that Lily would just be like, oh yeah, sure, you know, I'll hook y'all up. Like, I think that I wonder, I'm so envious of the writers, because I'm like, I want to know if there was a conversation between Lily and Lestat. I would want to see that conversation, because it just doesn't, when you watch it, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is just happening off the cuff. It feels like, wow, this man is at scream. He's out there. He doesn't care. But it really feels like Miss Lily is in on what Lestat is trying to do. And that I don't see her just being like, oh yeah, for money, I'll just get him away. And even the way that she looks back when they walk off, it shows you that they had something more than just, oh, let's talk because you're paying me. So I don't know. That's just what came to my mind when I came back to it.
Absolutely. And I do love Lily. Lily deserves better. I wish she was around longer. She's a sweetheart. And when we start episode 1 and we go back in time to 1910 in Louisiana, and we see a 33-year-old Louie, you know, being a pimp on the streets, but like the nicest pimp you'll ever meet. Like, if a pimp could be a sweetheart, that's Louie. And so he's like, this Black queer man in 1910 trying to like fulfill all these societal roles, and one of those is like portraying himself as straight. And they mention a line right before that he is gay, but he wasn't out at the time, of course, you know, for several reasons. And he's like, so to continue this facade of like this straight facing man, I go and see Miss Lily, but we just sit around and talk. And then they show the warmth. She's genuinely happy when Louie walks up to the table and she's already talking and she's already with Lestat. But Louie walks up and he kisses her hand, and there's like genuine love there. And the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, Lily, like, I understand that like that's her best friend. She knows he's gay, but also she was very much like pushing Lestat onto Louie. Because she was like, oh, did you hear him? He loves you, Louie. And I was like, girl,
exactly.
This is their first meeting. I do appreciate a supportive ally, but Miss Lily was also like, hey, he's gay, you're gay, I sense a connection. Y'all need to make it work. And I was like, somebody in the room needed to say it.
Right. Oh my God, I agree. I think that she's just, Miss Lily deserved better. I agree. But I kind of wonder though, because I think that there's definitely room for her to come back. In the scene before Lestat turns Louie, you know, when he was acting all crazy, like he didn't have any sense. I think he said, cut short that magnificent life that she was living, but a tragedy. And I'm like, that's not saying that you killed her. I think that that's room for her to come back. Because if he turned her into a vampire,
like a good flashback.
Yeah, like, because if he just turned her, you know, I mean, because she helped him. I can understand why he doesn't want her around, but
well, yes, that as well.
I think there's room. It may not happen, but I'm hopeful because I love her. And you have to say the Miss Lily. You can't say Lily. If anybody say Lily, that's very disrespectful, by the way. You have to say Miss Lily.
Miss Lily writes. We love Miss Lily.
So going on to episode 2, we see Rasheed and Daniel.
This character is okay. I'm not going to say my favorite character because all of them are equally my favorite character. I love every single character. I love a conflicted character. I love, like, don't give me a clear protagonist and a clear antagonist. No, give me like shades of gray. Everyone has issues, and then it's just my favorite thing I'm going to eat up. And here comes Rasheed. And in episode 1, even though he's playing very much subservient to Louie and does as Louie quote unquote orders, but even Louie says the line, "our boy," several times, referring to Daniel, but the hour is between him and Rasheed. And the first time I heard it, I was like, that sounds very strange. I was like, it catches my ear. This is going to come back. There's something to it, especially that Daniel has such a negative reaction to it. It's like, I'm not your effing boy, I'm an
it.
old man. And I was like, I feel that, Daniel. I understand your grumpy old manness because I feel it on the inside. And I do love, if there's tension between Louie and Daniel from scene 1, there's also tension between Rasheed and Daniel in scene 1. And there's times when Louie and Daniel are actually very much creating a respect and a bond and are tender to each other. You don't see that too much between Daniel and Rasheed. And I was thinking back and I was like, almost every episode, there's a hostility, there's a push and pull to their conversations. One of them is always trying to be on top when they're like talking to each other. And they're trying to one-up each other throughout the entire thing. So even as Rasheed comes in episode 2 and informs him about the painting, and that it was painted by a guy named Marius, which Daniel just blows off. He's like, well, never heard of him. Oh, well.
Right.
Rasheed is like, I'm going to present you with this food that we had, made by our special chef. And then Daniel comes in with so you and Louie, are y'all, more than just boss and assistant? And you could tell that Rasheed's like, you're not here to question me. You're here to question Louie. I don't have to answer your questions. And so not only am I going to deflect, I'm going to be very cryptic about my deflection. I was like, I serve a God. I'm happy to serve. And I was like, Daniel thought about that line probably for the rest of the night to be like, what is he talking about and what does he mean?
Oh my God,
I love
absolutely.
that.
Yes, I totally agree. That's a line that you just, that's a line that when someone tells you that, you have to think about it over and over again. You're like, wait, what? What are you even saying? I totally agree. So I think there is some similarities, not a lot, but some between the movie and the TV show. And I want to talk about the iconic scene when Lestat says,
do it! Embrace what you are! You are a killer, Louie!
Classic. Very classic in both. In 1994 and in 2022.
Right.
Very effective.
I want to talk about that because what's so amazing to me, and I'm talking about the show, the actor is Sam Reed, is that when you see him, when you see this scene, you really see one of the major differences between Lestat and Louie. And I think for me, my first thought, even when I watched the movie for the first time, and I watched the movie years ago, I think I was 10, I believe. I was young when I watched it. But I remember like the first time that I watched it again in my adult years is that like thinking about like my first thought was, why is he so adamant on Louie being like him or killing these humans? It's like he has to do it just like him. And I'm like, so my question for him is like, if you think that Louie has to kill these humans in order to survive, or he has to be like you, my question would be, why? Is it because you want him to be the strongest and want him to be happy and healthy, which I would assume, especially the TV show Lestat, which is actually in love with Louie? I would assume yes, but I will also think, is it because this is also you feeling like, okay, this is how I know that we're going to work out, and this is how I know that we'll always be together? Because if he's resisting being a vampire, it's like you're resisting what I did to you, in a sense. And then we kind of see that also in episode 2 when he's like, no sons, no daughters. He's very, resentful of the fact that, Louie is very resentful of, not having no sons, not having no daughters. He's upset. And so it really makes you think how much is Lestat hating the fact that he doesn't want to kill humans? How much of it is him reflecting his own identity? Mm-hmm. Or is it just him saying, hey, I feel like I'm going to lose Louie as well if he doesn't embrace this, because this is what I created?
I completely agree. And I see like all 3 points are like interplaying in this very complex character. And once again, I love it. And I feel that Lestat's first impression of Louie is like the pimp on the street who's willing to threaten his brother with a knife, who's willing to like play second fiddle to this man full of racists so that he can get ahead in his business and his money. And if Lestat's love language is violence, which I really think it might be, and he was so drawn to Louie in this moment of violence, he's like, okay, this is my companion heart in more ways than just the love of the rest of my unlife. Like, he's going to be just like me, and we're going to be the worst together, but we're going to be adorable when we do it. And to like, now he has to get to know Louie, because his courtship of Louie, in some ways, it was really fast. In other ways, it was kind of slow, because I do appreciate that he spent time with Louie at night, like in the park talking, and Louie like opening up and getting closer on an emotional level. But still to the point that like Lestat's like, it's time now for us to be together forever. Do you say yes? And I was like, Louie is still drunk. Louie is still grieving his brother. He just found out about Miss Lily. You just killed Father Matthias, who's my favorite priest in any show. You punched off a guy's head completely. And then he was like, hey, I love you. You want to be just like me for the rest of eternity? And Louie's like, yeah, I guess. I'm kind of afraid to say no right now. And so now Lestat has to live with the fact that Louie might not be who he thought he was during the entire courtship.
Absolutely. And he even says, yeah, I agree, because Louie also says, maybe I'm just pondering, you know, who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that we know that Louie has always struggled with, from him and his sexuality, from him as a Black man. So being a vampire does not take that away. It only, in the sense that I think it enhanced it and made it worse. But I think that also, you know, Louie is seen, right? He says that for the first time, and he's even accepted. You know, other than Paul, who else really accepted him for who he was? Mm-hmm. And I think that was a part of it. But I do believe that they actually share a genuine love as to why Louie accepted being a vampire. But I also think that even what kind of goes back to what you said, I don't think that Louie knew the cost of being a vampire. I don't think he fully understood that meant, in a sense, even though he tries to hold on to it desperately, it meant him giving up his humanity. It meant him not being able to be around his family. And I don't think he realized that when he accepted it. I think in that moment, it was like, I'm being seen. And even though he never admits it. And well, he does admit it, but even though he never says, I love you to Lestat, I do believe that he does love Lestat. And they love each other and they have an understanding of each other. But there was a cost. There's a cost to being with Lestat. And so it gets deep, which is the entire show.